Today's guest is Mr. Phil Henry. Thank you so much for joining me today, Phil. I'm very excited to have you here. Of course, I very selfishly invited you because of your connection with the Capricornia Chamber of Commerce and your service there in a volunteer capacity as president and today as vice president and external relations coordinator. And of course, you've been involved in the Village Festival at Yeppoon for quite some time, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. So I'm really keen to dive in and learn all about who is Phil and what makes Phil Phil. And I just want to say a very big thank you for joining me today.
You're very welcome, Nyree. I'm going to find this as fascinating as you, depending on what comes out.
Yes, well, as I said just before we hit record, I absolutely love getting to know people with these questions and this podcast journey.
Mm,
So I'm
great.
very happy that you agreed to join me because I think you've got so much to add, so much value to add to the region.
We'll give it a go.
We certainly will. Before we get really stuck into it though, can you tell me if you could be an expert in anything at all in the world, what would it be and why?
All right. I've heard all your other interviewees say what a great leading question. I'll agree with that. It's a river. As usual, nothing immediately came to mind, so I had to have a think. So here's the example. It's the best I can do. So it was sort of coming up to when I retired from the public service, which was 2015, and thinking about things to do. And one of the things that had been annoying me for quite a long time was change management, and how, every 3 years there'd be either a change of government or a change of just their arrangements, and they'd have a bit of a fiddle with the bureaucracy, none of which made sense, and the implementation were usually terrible. And I thought, here's a future income stream if I can become really good at that. And the other
Mm.
thing that drove me there was that sometimes people call me Dr. Phil. And I thought, gee, wouldn't a PhD be nice? How about a PhD in change management? So I took myself down to Sydney to go to a conference for a couple of days. And what I discovered that everything that could be done in terms of research about change management has been done. It's simply still never being implemented very well, either in the public or the private sector. So there's probably still an opportunity there, Nyree, but if I was going to become an instant expert, well, people would be ringing me up 24 hours a day saying, give us an answer to our problem in our organisation. That'd be me, but it hasn't happened yet.
That is such a fascinating one. And to be honest, in comparison to all other guests, it is one that I resonate with the most. Being in corporate business for 24 years or something like that, I absolutely have seen firsthand several times, more than several times, how that goes so wrong. Even with the best of intentions and quite skilled people, it just never goes well.
And you know what gets left out? People get left out. And
Mhm.
you'll remember that Monty Python skit where must have been the Life of Brian or whatever, and he's addressing the crowd and saying, we're all individuals, and they all go back, we're all individuals. So yeah, no, we're not. Well, yes, we are. The first instance, not the second. So no, that's it. You got to take into account people and culture.
Yes, yes. And if they're not in a good spot to start with, particularly culture, can make change even more challenging than it needs to be.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in situations where the two halves, for want of a better term, are being put together who have had mutual loathing for years, and that just gets disregarded.
Mm.
Oh, it's never there. No, we've all been individuals. Ah, it's just there. There you go.
I love that answer. You have no idea how much I love that answer.
Happy to help.
Yeah. Oh, that's absolute gold. So tell me a little bit about yourself, Phil, and what sort of roots and influences you've had over the course of your life,
Mm,
whether it be childhood, early career, the end of your career, the beginning of your new volunteer career, that you're
yeah.
probably doing in parallel, of course. But tell me a little bit about what makes Phil Phil.
All right. Well, like I said, I was over preparing, so I looked at a few of your questions, and I thought they're all linked because, as you know, everything is connected to everything else, Nari, isn't
Mhm.
it? So let's start at the beginning. So I was born in country New South Wales many years ago. And my wife, Margaret, she also came from country New South Wales. When I'm looking at sort of what you're trying to get at, and I don't know whether this actually informs part of how who I am or not, but I grew up in Dubbo for the first 15 years. And Dubbo was just sport mad. The annual festival was sport. All my friends were good at multiple sports. I don't have proper binocular vision, so I've never been much good at ball sports. But you had to join in, and otherwise you were just an outcast. So I did the best I could. But also the actual example is swimming. So we used to have the annual sports carnival, and all my friends were good swimmers, and one in particular, this would have been at the age of, I don't know, 10 or 11 or something like that. And he could do butterfly for crying out loud. You know, I mean, it's just amazing. Anyway, we had the sports carnival, and I was in it was either the 440 yards or the 880, sort of going forever. Anyway, I dived in and started. Anyway, everybody else had finished, and I still had 2 laps to go. And the mother of this bloke is shouting at me in the pool saying, "Look, just stop, Phil." Because my interpretation was, oh, she wants her son to get in and win another one. And I just thought, blow you. I'm in this. I'm going to finish the whole thing. So I don't know whether that's contributed to a kind of problematic relationship with authority. That's one that I sometimes think about. I don't know, that is overthinking it. Anyway, no, but it's certainly a memory that stuck with me because I thought this is so unfair.
Yeah,
You want me to
that's
go
a
in it? I'll finish it, which I
good
did.
amount of self-reflection there. I don't think that's overthinking at all.
Oh, I'm still angry about it. That's why. Let's be honest. Regional New South Wales. So you grow up, and we never thought about stuff like this. I mean, I left there when I was 15, I think. So you're not thinking really about the future. There was an assumption that you would go away and go to uni in Sydney or something like that. My father was a mechanic. We were the BMC agents: Austin Morris, Wolseley, Riley, MG, and Vanton Plus. So I grew up with all of those, which is why I still own the
That
flaming thing.
explains the car.
Oh, it explains all the other ones I've owned, more to the point. But he was getting increasingly frustrated with it, and I won't go into the detail, but there was something we found out about him towards the end of his life that explained that he wasn't just sick of coming home covered in grease and that sort of thing. It actually had to do with people and the ownership of the business and everything. So he got a job in Canberra, and we all moved down to Canberra, and I finished off my school there. That was a real eye-opener. A lot of my friends had come from Adelaide, or the ones that I met there had come out of Adelaide, and their parents had got jobs in the public service. And it was at a time when the public service was growing very quickly, which is how my old man came to join it 3 months before he would have been too old to join. So, you know, it became the environment, I guess. And I'm looking to see how I can link this with other stuff I wanted to say. But you went into year 12 and you did a test in the last term of year 12, which was an aptitude test for the public service. So I did that. And they asked you, what departments do you want to join? And I put foreign affairs first because I thought I'd love to go overseas, but I'd be a lot happier if the taxpayer paid me to go there doing the old top deck backpacker through Europe. Anyway, not that we knew about top deck then in Canberra. So yeah, I put foreign affairs first, trade second, and immigration third. And obviously I hadn't done very well on the test. They gave me immigration. So I thought, oh, that's all right. I can go overseas and be an immigration person. And then when I got there, I discovered that they wouldn't post you overseas until you were 26. Now, as I ended up doing immigration work as a foreign affairs officer later in my life, I thought, that's actually probably a good idea not to send 18-year-olds over choosing migrants.
Yeah.
So anyway, I got a Commonwealth scholarship. I could have gone to any uni in Australia, went locally, stayed at home. I don't know whether I regret the choice, Nyree, but it's worked out. And it kind of informs, I guess, my approach to all of this chat with you is that I don't consider that I've lived a purpose-driven life. I think I have lived a very fortunate life, and things have come along and I've gone, oh yeah, that sounds all right. So let's do that, which will eventually bring us to Capricornia, I guess. So yeah, so I went to uni, failed at everything after having been really good at school, failed at everything. It was a bad choice, of course, but I joined immigration, and then it took me a couple of years, and then I went across to foreign affairs. Round about that time, I met my wife, and we got married. And we went to Algeria about a year after that. She was only 20, 21. So yeah, I might pause it there and see if that's prompted any follow-up questions before I wrap it on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's fascinating. And as I said to you before I hit record, like I've obviously had quite a few guests so far that I've never met before or never spoken to,
Mm,
but just absolutely incredible people. And of course I've spoken to you many times. I've known you for a long time. And I just
mm,
love that this podcast gives selfishly me the opportunity to learn a little bit more about you. And, I've always known how worldly you are without even knowing this history of
mm,
what you actually did in the public service. I
yeah,
always knew you were a public servant, but not
mm.
specifically what it was. So a lot of pennies have just dropped in my mind.
Hey, righto. Feel
Yeah. So
feel free to spend them.
Well, and it was quite interesting when you shared, you don't feel like you've lived a purposeful life, but have been very fortunate, because I've been reflecting on that when you mentioned it a couple of days before this podcast, and I thought, I don't know that you recognise the contribution you've made to Capricornia small business. I really don't think that you grasp that value that you've added. I hope you do, or I hope you do at least by the end of this podcast. But the advocacy work that you've done, and you are just always out there banging the drum for small business. And it's like, and I don't mean this the wrong way at all, but those annoying people that just won't shut up about a topic, like, but it's not in a bad way. It's you
Mm,
just
yeah.
will not be quiet about small business and what small business needs. And
Mm.
of course, as a small business owner, I'm very thankful for that. So, yes, it's interesting. But before I take over the waffling, well, you're
Right.
not waffling, but I'm waffling. So you're on this journey, and you're in Canberra, and you're working in immigration and then later foreign affairs. And you've mentioned that, you had quite fortunate with the opportunities that came up. But what did that journey look like? What inspired that path along the way, where you took a left turn here and took a right turn here, and how did that look and feel?
Well, see, foreign affairs, by the nature of its structure and its purpose, is a career department in the way that very few others are. Maybe Treasury would be the closest one. Prime Minister's definitely not. All the other line departments, definitely not. But, with foreign affairs, if you stayed in it until you sort of shuffled off the mortal coil or reached retirement age, you'd gradually climb the greasy pole if you were good enough, but you'd get to see the world. So, like I say, we went to Algeria, and that was on very short notice. The bloke who was there couldn't, had to come home. And I had a bit of French, not a lot as it turned out, but the only languages spoken there were French and Arabic. There's no English at all, no English media, nothing like that. So we packed up some goods and off we went. I was already designated to go to Pac. So we went in January 77, sorry. And I was on the list to go to Pakistan in October 77. And I thought, Algeria is a very tough post. Once I've sort of settled in, I'm sure they'll leave me here, but they didn't. So we did about 8 or 9 months there. It must have been terrible for Margaret. She didn't have any French at all. I mean, she did a 2-week course, but that, hello, off you go. So trying to go out and buy, no transport. You couldn't use public transport. Trying to buy something for dinner. And I've got it's a clear memory to me. I don't know if it's actually accurate, which is two different things. Of living on toast and onions for the first 2 weeks until we were able to go to the market with my boss,
Mm.
and sort of that then became life and that. So anyway, off we went to Pakistan in October 77. We got there a week after they deposed Zia-ul-Haq, Bhutto, with Bhutto, and Zia-ul-Haq took power, military dictatorship, which it is for most of its existence anyway. Strict Sharia law, all of this sort of stuff. So an interesting time to go in there. As a diplomat, you had some not immunisation, but some distance from that, provided you didn't get up to anything stupid. So it was a little bit easier there. We had a club, we had a pool, we had a tennis court, we had places to go. So we took the Mini and drove up country and shot all the bloody universal joints on these roads and everything. I was driving up the Grand Trunk Road, which is the old Silk Road, up to Peshawar with Margaret one weekend, and the system there used to be with the buses, the inter-town buses, intercity buses were private. So the idea was for the buses would drive as fast as possible. Somebody would be standing beside the highway and they would slam on the brakes and pick them up and off they'd go. And so we're driving up towards Peshawar, up a rise and everything, and 3 buses abreast came at me and I'm in a Mini. So a moment's sheer terror. Unfortunately, I had somewhere to go. Anyway, but Pakistan was certainly a step forward in terms of private lifestyle, if you like. I won't go into what used to happen in the embassy, but let's say personal interactions colour everything else that goes on in life. So not to worry. Long stories there. I'll regale you over a Prosecco one day. Anyway, we put in for a cross posting. And I was designated to go to Singapore. By this stage, Margaret was pregnant with our first baby, with David, and we flew out pretty much on the cusp before she wouldn't have been allowed to fly. In those days, travelling on the public purse, if it was over 5 hours and with pregnancy, you could go first class. So we flew the only class that Pakistan Air had down to bloody Islamabad, down to Karachi, sorry, and stayed overnight in the Transit Inn. The first thing you did when you went into a local hotel was check if the toilet worked. It didn't. So I said, put us in another room, and they put us in the honeymoon suite, would you believe? Anyway, so next morning, 6 o'clock, out we go, and we're first class with Lufthansa. So you go up the stairs, and for one of the few times in our lives, we turn left and sit down. Oh, this is very nice. And they say, would you like a champagne? And Margaret says, oh, no, thank you. I'm pregnant. And I say, I'll have hers. Anyway. So we go home. I headed off to Singapore just before Christmas in 1979. This isn't sounding right. No, it's not. I'm a year out. Sorry, I'm 2 years out. 77. So yeah, just before Christmas 77. And this isn't adding up. I'll come back later. It's a long time ago, no. Long story short, I went off to Singapore. Margaret came a few months later after David was old enough to fly. You'd expect Singapore to be a lot easier place. It was probably all right for me, but Margaret, well, she could drive now, not now, but later I'll tell you how Margaret has never passed a driving test in her life.
Wow.
There's a long story behind it. We haven't got enough time for that one, but yeah. So anyway, when you see her driving around in the disco sport with the number plates, the OT, just steer a wide berth because she's never passed her driving since 77. But anyway.
Oh my goodness.
So Singapore, yeah, so it's a much more sophisticated place with lots of things to do and all of that. You could do shopping. We were reliant very much on our allowances, and they had been out of whack. They hadn't caught up with cost of living both in Pakistan and then in Singapore. So you're not rich. You're far from rich. So we're driving secondhand cars and stuff like that. But, there is stuff you could do. We did a few holidays up to up the kids. Our daughter was born in Singapore, so they were little by that stage, and we had a hotel we'd stay in, and then we go down to a cafe on the waterfront, and the Malaysian ladies there would take the kids out the back and entertain them for a couple of hours. 2 little blonde kids, yeah. So that was all right. That was Singapore. We came home. A job came up almost immediately in Jordan that I applied for. So off we went to Jordan. That was really interesting. Fascinating place. If you haven't been and ever get a chance to visit places like Petra and Wadi Rum and all of that, terrific. There was an interesting little Australian community there that I used to go out on the terps with regularly. But no, it was quite a good life. Margaret did a bit of part-time teaching at the school there, and the kids went to school. There was one sort of specific thing about Jordan. Yes, I won't go into the details, Nyree, but once we'd seen a few of the Palestinian refugee camps and talked to the local expat community, we've probably got a different view of the Middle East than many people have. That's a little bit too much of a hot issue for this one here, for what we're trying to do, but it was a real eye-opener, and it has never left us, I have to say. So 2 years there, really good time, applied for an extension, didn't get it, came home. A couple of months, Rangoon came up, and Rangoon had a reputation in the department of the best kept secret. Yeah, right. But that was a really interesting posting. We went there for 3 years. Such a different place. Can't go into all the detail, but yeah, place that had been hidden from the world and still really was. I used to do, as I said, I got to do immigration work on behalf of the Department of Immigration, went across to Bangkok where the immigration bloke was and had a bit of a chat with him, and eventually came to the conclusion that he wasn't interested in what happened in Burma. So I went back, days before computers, obviously, and all that sort of stuff, which restricts you now. And all sorts of very worthy people weren't meeting the entrance test, including the Bar Pei family from Mandalay Medical Centre. So I migrated all that family. And when you look at what they've done for Rocky, all right, they've closed down now because they're all getting old and everything and that sort of thing. But no, just fascinating. Now, there's another sort of side story here that I was going to come to later. But Margaret was working in Rocky after we moved up here. So jump forward to that. But there's a bit that's missing. Just a quick anecdote. Margaret was working in the mental community health centre there in Rocky, and there was an Asian lady there who used to have these very aromatic lunches. And one day Margaret said, that smells a bit like mohinga, which is one of the 2 national Burmese dishes. And she said, yes. And she looked at Margaret and said, you're not Phil Henry's wife, are you? Small world. Small world. Anyway, just jumping back a bit, came home from Burma, settled back into Australian life there in Canberra, kids going to school and everything. I then went to uni. The department put me through uni. thankfully. Talk about people who've influenced you. The bloke who was my boss at the time, a fellow called Les Rowe, who now sadly has passed away, he encouraged me to go on that course. And that opened up yet another sort of set of worlds of academia. And I eventually went on and did an MBA after that. But Les's strong recommendation got me onto, even though I failed the entrance test. So there you go. But after a couple of years, I've been applying for, I can now do policy work, not constant admin. Started applying, wasn't getting anything, but we're talking about it at home, that every 6 months the list had come up, where would we like to go? And our son, or our kids both knew that that was our life, but our son wasn't game to interfere because he knew that was our life. So he was 13, so he was running off the rails like all 13-year-old boys do anyway. And eventually his teacher rang us up and said, can you come in for a chat? I said, you need to talk to your son. He doesn't want to go overseas. So a year later, we're living in Brisbane. I had a job at the time in touch with all the states and territories on trade development stuff. So I knew everybody in the different states and territories. The only two that came up that we could afford to go to were Brisbane and Perth. And Perth's a long way away from everywhere, even though we lived overseas. That's all I rang a bloke called Nigel up and said, you got any jobs? And he said, oh, just look at the ads. And I said, I'm doing that already, Nigel. Anyway, a job came up and got that. So we moved to Brisbane.
I have two questions for you.
Yep.
Follow-up questions that I didn't warn you about. What was the course that you did at university?
It was one that Foreign Affairs, there's an interesting story about change management. So the Department of Foreign Affairs and the Department of Trade amalgamated in 1987.
Mhm.
So by the time all this came around, it was about 3 years later from memory. But Foreign Affairs, after all of this, so it had started to integrate, except it hadn't. And Foreign Affairs suddenly discovered, there was a senior bloke there who tumbled to this, that in a sense, Foreign Affairs lived down to the kind of public understanding that you're all dilettantes. They'd all done all the way up to PhDs in the humanities and all this sort of stuff, in philosophy and English literature or whatever, but it wasn't much use in a imminently globalized world where trade was becoming much more important. And all the blokes in trade knew their stuff backwards. They all had everything from just undergraduate degrees all up to PhDs in economics. So the department commissioned ANU initially, actually, ANU, yes, it was, to do a graduate diploma in foreign affairs and trade there was stuff like economics, international law, it was 8 subjects or whatever. I didn't have an undergraduate degree, but Les's recommendation got me onto that. And they actually opened it up to about half a dozen people from my sort of side of the works that didn't have degrees. So I got onto that one, which once I'd had my eyes open to tertiary study, then I led on to an MBA, and Les got me onto that one as well.
No, that's fascinating. So when you got to Brisbane, was that the end of your international travel that kind of grounded you in Australia, or international travel for work? It grounded you?
Yeah, no, I did do a couple of trips. Actually, yeah, no, Darwin isn't overseas.
No, it's not.
No, I did have a couple of very interesting trips to Darwin with former ministers and things, which brought me up against my former colleagues who, including once again, probably one for somewhere else, Nyree, but ended up sitting at the table with all the trade ministers from the states and territories, because it was after the 1998 election, and there'd been a change of government, and that's when Beattie got in, and there actually wasn't an appointed minister, and the more senior people out of the department were all very aligned with the blue side of politics, so they couldn't go. So Phil ended up there at the table, but we'll leave that one for another time.
Sounds like this Prosecco is going to happen sometime soon. I feel sorry for all the podcast guests who are not going to hear the Prosecco conversation.
So that brought us to Brisbane. So I led a little policy unit there and did a few different things, including one that the universe aligns, Nyree. And this morning, as recently as this morning, the universe aligned. So I'm not sure where I'm going to bring that one in. But so how did I get from Brisbane to Rockhampton or to Capricornia?
Yeah.
Brad Carter.
Okay.
You remember Brad? So Brad was the regional director for state development under its various names here, and Brad decided he wanted to be mayor, as you'd remember. You would have been, you were here, of course, weren't you?
Yeah. What year was it?
And
I was in Brisbane in 2000.
Okay. Well, Brad was regional director for state development, had been for a long time, and decided he wanted to be mayor. He told the department about it. They did nothing about it until the last minute and said, we need someone to go to Rockhampton. A few of us put up our hands. I got the gig to come up just temporarily. Brad squeaked in after preferences. Another story that runs alongside this. Margaret's first job after she graduated as a occupational therapist in 2001. She knew she was going to be working for Queensland Health, and she'd have to do a regional posting first. First one came up was Rockhampton in the hospital. Psych ward. She had psych ward experience, so that didn't phase her. We drove up. I'd been to Rocky a couple of times. So we're fighting with the students for student level accommodation, and Margaret wasn't too entranced with what was on offer. So we drove down to Yeppoon, where neither of us had ever been. I'm on Sunday, and Brian, last name, he's in James Street, real estate agent. I can never remember names when I need them. He was open on a Sunday morning in the Evia building there, and his son's Jared, and Jared runs it now, but still can't think, try to picture it. There was a apartment there just above, and the young lady was moving out at the time. And he said, "You want to go and look?" We said, "Yes." So we're walking up. We get to the back door, and he holds us and he says, "Look, she's physically moving out. It's not prep. That's all right. I have to warn you, it's a bit 1970s. So we open the door and you look through the lounge area to the kitchen. And the kitchen was cork floor, timber cabinets, lime green bench tops, which was exactly what we had in our house in the Brisbane before we got the kitchen renovated. So Margaret said, "I could be very happy here." So she lived there for 10 months and then got a job back in Ipswich. So came back. But that's one of the inflection points because, like I say, we both came from country New South Wales. We could both see that Brisbane was going to become unlivable, except Margaret saw it 10 years before me because that's how our marriage worked, and that we needed to move out at some stage, and preferably we would move before retirement because it's much easier if you sort of settle in a community. So we drove up and down the coast. We kept on coming back to Yeppoon. So we bought a house here in 2004 as a rental. So then jump forward a couple of years and all of a sudden I'm regional director and Margaret transfers up to Rocky here where she meets people who make Mohinga for lunch. And away we go.
And
But
all of the stars align.
all of the stars align. We love it. We
Yeah.
just love it here. It's brilliant. We were going to buy a house that overlooked the water if we weren't going to move, but where we are now does that. So yeah,
Amazing.
everything's good.
And of course, you are in Yeppoon, not quite
Yes,
Rocky. However, this is, I've
it's the
said a couple of times now, I can't have it be like Rockhampton, Yeppoon, Emu Park, Boralaba, Gladstone with Nyree. So the
but
podcast is not named appropriately.
no, but I will interrupt you there because if I wanted to make a point out of this podcast, it will be about regions,
Yes,
because I think regionally. And that's, I think, one of the things that I'm jumping ahead again, but let's go, is that regions are undervalued.
absolutely.
And as we all know, and I guess if I have a purpose in life, I've come to it very late, which is about advocating for regions and trying to do stuff for regions,
And that's
which
why your
brings
work at the Chamber of Commerce is so prevalent.
yes, exactly. So I'll just flick back to you to see what comes next before we get back to
Yeah,
that.
it's probably a great segue because I really want the nitty gritty about what it means to be on the Capricorn coast, in Rocky, and in central Queensland in general. What that means to you, your family, your outlook, your perspective.
Yeah, that's your last three questions all in one.
No, no, it's the middle one. It's the middle one.
Let's see how you go. Well, what it's meant, like I say, it has given me this sort of a direction and a purpose as to what can I do in terms of this region in particular. The chamber, we do what we can. As you know, we're an all volunteer. It's one of my favourite catchphrases. What COVID? Hang on, well, let's just pop back a bit, because you did mention I was president of the chamber for a while. So how does somebody who ended up being a career public servant get there? So there's a story behind everything because stories tell stories. So anyway, left left state development, set up as a consultant, which eventually started bringing me in a little bit of income. But I joined the chamber. Now, the bloke who was the president at the time, and I'm deliberately not naming him, he and I had done a bit of ABC radio together. So something would happen that would affect the business community, and they'd get the pair of us in there, Jackie Mackay, and she'd say what the story was, and this president would go off his nut about everything that's wrong with the world and all that sort of thing. And then Jackie would flick to me. Now, Public servants can't make policy and can't articulate policy or anything like that. All I was able to say was, oh, yes, but the government has a program that will fix that. So anyway, so everybody knew what the rules were, if you like, you know. But out of that, after a few of those, this bloke said to me, I'd like you on the committee for the chamber. So, all right, I joined the committee. So even though I just joined the chamber as a alleged business person. About a year after that, Josh Fox, who you would know, the lawyer in
Yeah.
town, Josh had been secretary and he was stepping away to focus on a couple of other things. And I thought, well, if there's anything that my background in what I've done over the years, I've run secretariats for organisations, stuff like that, I can be a secretary. So I said, I'll put my hand up for secretary. So everybody said yes. So away we go. So I have a year or so as secretary. And then there was an AGM. And of course, we're coming up to our AGM for the chamber in a couple of weeks' time. But the same fellow who was president, says, he goes through his report and everything, and he says, we've got a couple of positions of vice president that we've never filled. Now, did you ever know Neil Lefleen? Used to be with Capricorn Enterprise. So
Yes. Yeah.
he was the economic development bloke for Mary there in Capricorn Enterprise. And Neil's down the back of the room and he says, oh, Phil can be one. All right. So I become vice president. All right, all good. Another year or so, the president, who had been in I'm really got to be careful here, had been in a certain occupation all his life, decided he didn't want to be in that occupation anymore and went into a new occupation. And the hierarchy in that new occupation did a bit of a Google search of stuff that he'd said, which was there on online, which it always is, and said, oh, you can't be on the chamber committee because of what you've said about this particular thing. So who's next in line? The vice president.
President. That's how that happened.
That's how that happened. And then the next thing that happens is COVID,
Mm.
which is, I guess, where I start. You would have seen Nyree because, that's where I started to get a bit active. There was a meeting of business people down here about a few things, but Angie Olsen and I went along to the chamber for the business perspective, and I came back and thought, we've got to do something about this. So I crafted a policy which made it very clear we're only interested in the impacts on business and particularly hospitality, because that's where it was hurting most. Margaret and I were out to dinner the night the spacing restrictions. We were sitting there having dinner in a restaurant, and the proprietors were taking away every second table while we're sitting there eating dinner. So we'd seen it for real life. So I crafted this policy. The chamber adopted it. I sent it down to Livingston Council. I actually sent it to both councils. Livingston were having a meeting that day and have a big discussion, and they decided to adopt it. But it actually put our chamber on the map. And I was picking up a lot of it was misplaced because a lot of it thought that we'd actually called the meeting to everybody have a whinge about vaccines and everything, if you like. But I sent that around for anybody from around Australia who inquired, no, this is what we're doing. If you want to talk about the other stuff, I'll give you a contact and that sort of thing. But the other thing was a lot of media. So in particular, Channel 10, who had their studio here at the time, they'd ring me up and say, oh, something's happened, Phil. Can we have a chat? And I said, I'll make some shit up. But that also helped put the chain, that we're here doing stuff.
I'm not sure if you'll remember, obviously, because you work with so many different small businesses. We only got into business on the 1st of Feb 2017. First couple of years to then be hit with COVID. And that's when I really started to see, because we were already members of the chamber, of course.
Yes.
But then that's where I started to see the value that you and the team were bringing to the region and to Capricornia. And yeah, it's almost like I've just had a bit of a flashback for a minute, because I probably didn't give it credit, that I was only 3 years in business with Nathan, our mechanical workshop, to then have to navigate the world of COVID, which, yes, we were not hospitality. We are not hospitality, but still a huge impact.
Exactly.
And yeah, the work that was happening behind the scenes. To be honest, I look at it now and I think, I just think I took it for granted how good we were in Capricornia, as in not we as a business, as in the chamber. I just thought every chamber would be doing that, or every business community would be doing what you were doing in the team. But now that we have this conversation and I have looked at other regions and towns and states and territories and seen how they've navigated, or how they did navigate it, I kind of now have the appreciation to go, we actually did okay with the support that was available.
We're also very lucky. Quick anecdote. I used to be involved with the village festival, as you know, and I'd seen this duo, Hussey Hicks. Great if they ever come back here. I'd seen them down at Agnes Water, and so we got them up here. It took a couple of years because of COVID, but they drove up, and I had them in a motel or whatever. It was actually after their set. I can't remember who we had as headliners that year. But he went to have a few sort of drinks after it closed down for the Saturday night. The woman asked Jules Parker, look her up on YouTube, brilliant guitarist. Jules and Lisa, Hussey Hicks. But I ran across Jules and she looks at me and she says, oh, can we have a hug? And I said, up here, Jules, we never stopped hugging, mate, so it'll be all right. And that's how different it was. Everybody was doing this sort of stuff.
Yep. No, that's
So
great.
there was that, but the chamber, as we did really get active.
Yeah, and so to be honest, so did our local politicians, both state and federal. Like I
Mm,
look back on it now and
mm,
think about so our business is of course in Rocky, so what Barry
mm,
O'Rourke did just to try and showcase businesses and that they were still open. And then Michelle Landry
mm.
did the same thing. So
Yes.
Barry was the state member for Rocky, getting out there, talking to businesses, putting them on his socials because obviously politicians have a
Mm,
fairly good social following. And then Michelle came and did the same thing. Like they were obviously both doing it very actively. And then the chamber was doing what it was doing. And I'm just at the time thought that's what everyone did, but it's not. It's what happened in Capricornia in Rockhampton.
and we should all be also, but it's
Absolutely. Yeah. And, 3 years into business for myself and Nathan,
yes.
I like completely naive. You're in that silly period of time, that 0 to 5 years, and then you've got your 5 to
Mm.
10 and, different stages of development through a business. And you just don't realize these things until you stop and think about them and reflect.
Now, do you remember I once interviewed you for the Business Awards under a previous model, not the one we've used for the last couple of years?
Yes, in 2018.
Okay, right, you do. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
We won that year too. That blew my mind. And then
Yes.
we won again, of course, in was it
23,
2023?
24?
Wasn't
Last
24, it must have been 23. Yep.
yeah.
No,
Okay. Yep.
yes, fun times, hey. So,
Mm.
I have another question for you.
Yep.
So, I'd really like to know, and it can be either end of the scale, but what is either the biggest challenge you've ever had to face or the most proudest moment you've ever had that's really helped to shape your perspective and the way you approach life?
Yeah, I had a bit of a think about this, and I'm not sure I've got an answer for challenges. In a sense, foreign affairs just kept on throwing things up because you'd be doing the same job, but in a different civilization in many ways. But I did come up with something that I guess I was in retrospect. And I'm just looking up here at a picture of the committee for the village festival, and that's kind of another one. I'm stuck, Nyree. You might
You can choose.
might have to do some no, I'll do the one down in Brisbane. So, and that links actually to something else I wanted to talk about. So, the role I had in the last couple of years before I left, and we used to have these little industry development units, and I was put into one for pharmaceuticals without any knowledge of the pharmaceutical industry at all. But geez, you learn quickly. So I inherited there was a thing that the previous bloke had put in, and he was a departmental favourite, and I wasn't because I tended to speak up too much. And that cost me a lot. But so we used to have a meeting every 3 or 6 months or something like that, where the team, about 4 of us, would talk about what the department's doing. Yeah, wonderful, and everybody would go, "Oh yes, that sounds wonderful." And then you'd break for morning tea, and everybody would be like this, and I'm thinking, right, we are missing an opportunity here. So I'd done a leadership course with the department with a couple of very interesting blokes. So I got one of them in as a consultant to do a bit of wrangling of people. I didn't really see myself as an expert at that. Maybe now, then certainly not. And this bloke was an expert. And all these representatives from industry around the table, as he was very fond of pointing out, and they all said, we're all competitors. So, and most of them were in complementary medicines. So there was only one manufacturer so you've got registered medicines and listed, as you might know. So the listed are your complementaries, your registered are the ones that actually have a clinical effect. There was only Alpha Farm who made generics. All the rest were in complementaries, and they're all in competition. So between him and me, we got these people talking together, and I had a really good bloke in my team who was keen on raising the level of competency and the level of professionalism in all these. And they were all faced with an issue that the chemistry graduates that came out of UQ had no clinical experience. They had no real life experience. They only had what you get in lectures. So he managed to put together a bit of he got Gold Coast, actually no, South Brisbane Uni, whatever it's called, South Bank Uni, to put a course in because they actually specialised in this sort of thing that enabled people who had no other knowledge except for what they were learning at uni to go in. But what we did, what the facilitator and I did was get these people looking to work together towards stuff. And what I wanted it to move to was not the department running it, but them running it. So after a couple of meetings, I pointed at one of them, I pointed at all of them and said, choose a chairman. I'm sick of chairing these, so you do that. Fast forward a couple of years, they spun it out, they commercialised it, and it's still in place as a commercialised business looking after that sector, which is not well recognised in Queensland. So when I left the department to come up to Rocky, there was a conference going on, but they did a bit of a farewell for me, and a couple of these blokes who'd have to teach me all about pharmaceuticals and everything. Most of them started their working life brewing beer. Would you believe? Because it's exactly the same process.
Yeah,
Uh,
wow.
Almost the same process, but it's the same levels of safety, health and safety. Gave me a wonderful send off and said, "Oh, we're really going to miss you," and that sort of thing. So yeah, no, when I look back at that now and think, yeah, okay, made a bit of a change there.
Mhm. That's a great change. That's definitely something to look back on and be proud of.
Because it's all just sitting in the back of my brain. I don't think about it every day, but yeah,
No, that's it, yes.
I had to
And
dredge. Well, it was
that's one
actually
of
sorry, go on.
I was just going to say that's one of my favorite reasons for doing this podcast as well, is to get those stories out of the back of people's brains and share them.
All right, I'm now going to bring it all together for you.
Awesome.
To
Well,
wrap it up,
yeah.
okay. I've got she's still a good friend down in Brisbane. She's actually the one who took that pharmaceuticals role when I left. So she was in the room at the time and everything. And she just blows me away. Lady called Tracy Johnson. So look her up on LinkedIn. She's now the CEO of Inala Healthcare, along with a lot of other things. And she put something up on LinkedIn yesterday, talking about something she's involved in. And I couldn't quite grasp what it was. So I just put a comment there and said, congratulations yet again. I don't know how you do it. Do you want a regional perspective to this?
Mm.
And she gets me out of bed this morning. Thanks, Tracy. I'm retired. I sleep in. Anyway, but there she is, and she wants to talk about this and how it can come together. Now, as it turns out, she said, "Oh, look, I'm doing a conference in later November. Would you like to come down and be the regional voice?" And I said, "Oh, what date? What date?" And I said, "No, I can't do that. I've got MG club responsibilities on that day." That's another one. So we got chatting and she explained to me what it was. And I've since looked it up on LinkedIn, and there's already a regional perspective. And there's an organisation called, I'll just bring it up now. It's called Country to Coast Queensland, but it's very health focused. I mean, Tracy already had some clinical experience and knowledge when she took over from me, whereas I had to start from here. But she's done really well, and she's got bags of energy, very similar to you, always looking for the links and looking for what can be done. So she doesn't really need my help with the regional perspective. But that's I guess to get to your point, that's still driving me.
Yeah.
What can I do here that's got that regional perspective that I might be, it's not out of my knowledge. It's it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Mm.
So yeah, who can I bring together to do stuff? And if I can add to it, that's fine, but so I'm still looking for what I can do for this region, if you like, through the things that I don't, that didn't fall my way because I've known Tracy for 20 years or whatever. But yeah,
Yeah.
just,
It's all about that alignment, hey?
that's
Those
right.
opportunities, like, and today, for that to happen today on the day that we're recording this podcast.
Exactly. And I said to her, I said, you won't believe, I said, I'll send you a link to the podcast. So, cause you'll
Yeah.
have to see this.
Yes, that's I know I overuse this word, but that is honestly amazing. It's like my favorite word. I'm just gonna use it.
It's not 6 degrees of separation. It's about 0.75.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Oh, so tell me though, if
Mm.
you could give a piece of advice to younger people who are coming along after you and I, advice related to anything, like what would it be?
Depends how young you're talking. But I mean, I guess one is always listen carefully to what people are saying to you. Now, Margaret will tell you that I've never done this in my life. And I certainly don't do it with her, but she's got a particular perspective. I'm not going to send this link to her. Yes, I will. No, it's just listen carefully to, is there something in what might seem to be just an ad hoc conversation or whatever? Is there something in there? And I guess the other half of that is don't give up. I couldn't stop today. I couldn't stop here. I couldn't, once we finish this, I could go onto YouTube and look at all my favourite bands, and I'll probably do that anyway. But I can't stop doing what I'm doing. I've got to be doing something that, and this links, I guess, to what I'd originally said to you about not living a purpose-driven life, is possibly having a purpose at this stage. I don't know. This is going to. I'm not going to thank you at 3:00 tomorrow morning, Nyree, because I'm going to be going. Oh, right. What did I mean by that?
No, it's I'm still fascinated by that comment or the statement from you about the purpose-filled life. And I know, like, in isolation, you probably don't think these are significant things, but even when you do, the couple of things we've spoken about today, your experience in your career, coupled with volunteering for your MG club, village festival, the Chamber of
Mm,
Commerce, your willingness to just get up, have a go, make it up if you have to.
yes.
Like, y-
Yeah.
not everyone can do that. A lot of people can't do that, Phil. And I think not
Mm.
only are you delivering that service to the region, but you're also showing other people how to do it, even though you might not realize that you're teaching them.
All right. I very much appreciate that, Nari. Thank you very much.
I'm a big, big, big fan of a saying that everyone in life is a teacher. They're either teaching you
Mm,
what to do or they're teaching you what not to do. And that's one of my favorite mottos. Everything that you do, you're teaching people if they choose to listen and pay attention,
mm.
which was your biggest piece of advice. So if you really listen to what's happening around you and to the conversations that people are having with you can take all of those lessons and they're free.
You've just given me a thought. I'll send this link obviously to our kids and ask them if they agree, because they've both turned out in very different ways, just turned out really great. As you probably know, our daughter lives in Abu Dhabi and works for AECOM. So, she's a fellow like that. The young bloke's done very well. He's a regional manager now for BRF. So they are wholesalers of commercial industrial air conditioning, and occasionally even home air conditioning. I don't have it here next to which comes in. It's about time he came in handy for getting a few dollars off for his parents. So, it's how they've lived their lives. I think Margaret and I, and it's probably more Margaret, I understand, can look back on what we've produced there and go, no, we've produced two really good people. So, and that
Takes
is
a lot of
something
faith.
that you can look back on.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I also do want to note, like, your decision when your son was 13 to stay put and not
Mm,
travel anymore, while you did do a couple of stints, that's really brave as a parent. And it's quite selfless. And of course, that is what a lot of parents do. They put their children's needs in front of their own. And to pay attention and listen to what your son needed at that time in his development,
mm,
of course he can come and do air conditioning stuff for you. You've spent your whole life making sure that he could and your daughter
mm.
could grow up to be the best
Yeah.
kid.
No, because see, a lot of people in foreign affairs put their kids into boarding school, and we were never going to do that. And we certainly weren't going to do it at that stage of his development, for want of a better term. And Margaret had gone to boarding school, and she still bears the scars. So,
Mm. No, it's interesting how our own experiences shape the way that we parent. And then of course I'm not there yet, just on the cusp of it, but then seeing your children
mm.
become adults and how they then live their lives, I can imagine is quite fascinating.
Well, see, the two have turned out utterly differently. Didn't want to go overseas again.
Mm.
He's only recently been overseas on holiday, and he's done two of those since wherever it was, 1988. Whereas Karen has lived most of her adult life overseas, and we kind of have a realization that she'll probably always live overseas, provided she can get people to pay her as much as she thinks she's worth.
Yes.
Which at the moment is, Abu Dhabi, so it's tax free, so she does all right.
Wow. Well, good on her. That's
Yeah, good
awesome.
on both of them.
Yes, absolutely. But thank you so much, Phil. I've really enjoyed this and have appreciated your very generous time.
Oh, no problem. I was looking forward to seeing what was going to come out of my mouth. So there you
Yeah,
go.
I'm looking forward to the Prosecco catch up, which won't
No,
have a microphone or a camera.
yeah, no, anytime, Nari, no problem.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Go on. Thanks very much. See ya.